Manchester United's interest in Morgan Gibbs-White is being reported as genuine and talks of a record bid for his teammate Anderson as Carlos Baleba's price drops, and all the latest Manchester United news and transfer updates, keeping you right up to date with everything. Let's get into it. So a story came out yesterday from Chris Wheeler and Nave Sout in the Daily Mail regarding Morgan Gibbs-White, which was quite interesting. There's been a further update, which I'm going to go through next as well, which is why I'm leading with the story. So firstly, Chris Wheeler and Nave Sout said Manchester United have joined the Premier League clubs monitoring Morgan Gibbs-White's situation at Nottingham Forest. United have also have strong interest in Gibbs-White teammate Elliot Anderson. There's news on him I'm going to run through in a second. Are among a number of rivals looking to benefit if Forest are relegated this season. Gibbs-White, who can play at 10 or wide on both flanks, has a release clause in his new contract he signed after Tottenham failed with a £60 million bid last year. Remember the whole shenanigans last summer regarding Gibbs-White and his move to Tottenham that got blocked, and then he ended up obviously staying at Forest. So Nave Sout and Chris Wheeler, who are good United journalists as well, so this is definitely something to pay attention to, saying that we have joined basically the race for Morgan Gibbs-White. How like whether that's blown out of proportion or people are making a mountain out of a molehill, because I'm sure we're inquiring and putting the feels out for a lot of players to see what the situation is, and as it's reported in there, if he's got a release clause, then maybe that would be advantageous for United, and especially if with Forest's situation in the league and the fact they might, they face potentially one of the clubs fighting for relegation. If they go down, there could be an opportunity to go in and grab a few of the players, just like there would be an opportunity if Tottenham get relegated to go and grab a few of their players. And the same with, any of the clubs that are like Wolves were obviously had interest in João Gomez. Could that represent itself in the summer if and when Wolves get relegated? Because I don't think they're going to get out of their predicament. But that Mateus Fernandes at West Ham as well. So how strong that interest or how far down the line we are doesn't not clear from that report. But firstly, before we go to the next story, give us your thoughts on Morgan Gibbs-White. I'm on the fence about it. I'm going to let you convince me either way in the comments, because it's not really one that I've thought of before. Like, it wouldn't be at the top of my transfer plans for the summer, that's for sure. So but yeah, I'll bow down to you. You let me know in the comments whether you think that would be a good shout or a bad shout. But there's been another report coming out from Fraser Fletcher saying that after reports overnight linked Gibbs-White with a surprise summer move to Old Trafford, sources can now confirm the interest from Manchester United is genuine and with good reason. The attraction for United is highlighted by the suggestions that Gibbs-White contract contains a release clause, allowing him to move to a Champions League qualifying club for a fee in the region of £80 million. Now, £80 million still feels like a stretch too far for me personally. Like, I don't know. I'm unconvinced is what I'm going to say regarding the Gibbs-White news. What's he got this season? 37 appearances, 8 goals, 5 assists. In a struggling Forest team, squad player, but then you're going to pay £80 million for a squad player. I'm not convinced that's the type of profile that we need. The question would be, though, if Bruno goes, do we need to bring in, like a number 10? He is combative and physical, so would add a little bit of energy to the front line, I suppose. But I don't know if he would be my number one choice, even if it's as a Bruno replacement as well. So, but again, could be one of those opportunities, but I'm not entirely convinced. So it sounds like, going off of those reports, that there is genuine interest in Morgan Gibbs-White. How serious that interest is, though, it could have just been a conversation to say, what's his release clause? And then we found out, and, we may never go anywhere near that deal again. But who knows? We'll keep an eye on it. But yeah, let me know in the comments. What do you think? Gibbs-White, good option, bad option, steer clear, £80 million, all of that stuff. Get involved. Convince me either way. It'd be interesting to read those later. Now, sticking with Forest, and the main candidate that we're heavily linked with is, this is probably not going to come as a surprise to you, but for some people, in case you've not been around for the last 6 or 7 months, Elliot Anderson is seen as the number one option for midfield. I think Fabrizio Romano was saying again yesterday that United love him, and all of that stuff. It's not really breaking news, but it says, under Ineos's ownership, the Red Devils view Anderson as the ideal addition to overhaul their midfield, especially with Casemiro and others potentially moving on. United see him as their priority target, and we understand they are prepared to break their transfer record to secure his services and are willing to meet the north end of Forest's asking price to ensure they win the race. Nottingham Forest valuation in the region of £85 to £100 million range. So according to that report, we know Anderson's priority. He's the main midfielder that we would want to go for. But going to be expensive. We're going to need some dollar to go for Elliot Anderson, plus the fact that there's going to be competition, mainly for Manchester City. Reports are Chelsea might even be interested as well, because why would they not be interested in a transfer target that we're going for? But according to that report, it's £100 million for Anderson, a player that we love. We'll have to wait and see. It's shouldn't come as a surprise that we're linked with Anderson. He's a top target. It's going to be expensive. We're going to compete with Man City. We're probably going to have to offer him a ton in wages as well. Just on wages though, Chris Wheeler in their report did say United have been trying to drive down their wage bill, but it could leave them in a severe disadvantage in the chase for Gibbs-White and Anderson, even more so with Manchester City and Chelsea understood to be tracking Anderson in particular. So it could, hinder us for some transfers, the fact that we are being a little bit more structured with our wage bill. I'm going to go on to wages and speak about that more in a second once we go through the update in a bit on André Onana. So that's the latest regarding Elliot Anderson. The other midfielder that we've been widely linked with is Baleba. So while Elliot Anderson looks like he's going to be, £100 million or there or thereabouts, Carlos Baleba is the other one. So Man United have been handed major encouragement in their pursuit of Brighton midfielder Carlos Baleba, with the South Coast club are expecting to soften their £100 million demands. Insiders now believe a deal could be struck closer to an overall package worth around £70 million. Brighton Destroyers viewed as their standout option for the more defensive midfield role. Now that came from Graham Bailey, so suggesting that Brighton might be softening their asking price for Carlos Baleba, which I think is only the right thing to do. I don't think we should go anywhere near this deal for £100+ million, considering the red flag around his form this season. Even at £70 million, I'm still a little bit like they're still probably getting above what he's currently worth based on his current form. But there is still potential there. He did have a good season last season. There could be other factors that we don't know of. Like, I don't follow Brighton news. I don't know, what's going on behind the scenes. They're not as good in general, I don't think, this season to what they were in previous seasons. So maybe it's not just a Baleba thing. Maybe it's a Brighton thing, and they're all struggling, with stuff that's going on behind the scene. I don't know. I don't follow anything around Brighton's news. But maybe there's a reason behind his dip in form. But I still think £70 million is still a bit of a gamble, especially when you look into this, right? So I did a bit of a comparison, and this is Manuel Ugarte against Carlos Baleba this season, and I would argue to suggest that maybe Manuel Ugarte's done a little bit better, albeit with less minutes. But then Carlos Baleba's minutes aren't exactly fantastic. Like, he's been on the bench a few times recently, been subbed before halftime in games and at halftime in games this season. So, but when you look at it in terms of ball winning, they are both very, very similar. Both similar in terms of their ball carrying, but actually Ugarte's been a little bit more progressive on the ball this season than Carlos Baleba. So we're paying £70 million for a Ugarte replacement, for someone that we paid 55 was it, I think, £million for Ugarte, and hasn't quite worked out. That is a massive red flag for me. It really is. But the interesting thing, though, if we look at Carlos Baleba last season, because last season I felt that he was really, really good. Like, what on earth has happened from where he was last season? His ball carrying's dropped, passes have dropped, passing percentage, progressive passes, like all of his on-the-ball stuff has dropped. But he's got much better at winning the ball. So is it a stylistic thing at Brighton where he's just being asked to do too much of a defensive role? Is it a system change? I don't know what's caused his drop-off in form, but it is a massive concern. And going back to the story, it's still a massive concern even for £70 million, I think. I think that's their starting point, £70 million. Then maybe you can negotiate that down 50 with some add-ons, something of that nature, if you still want to go all out for Carlos Baleba, because there's been no sort of reports to suggest that he's no longer on the list. In fact, if anything, the reports have always been that United are not put off by his form this season. They still see him as the one to go for the defensive midfield role. But I think it's good that, maybe if that report is to be believed, that Brighton are starting to maybe relax their stance and realising that they're not going to get anywhere near the £100 million that they probably could have got for him or were asking for him last season. And, it's been a bit of an own goal by them, hasn't it, really, not negotiating and waiting and hoping that his form would continue and his price would go up, and it's worked out the opposite, hasn't it? But yeah, we'll pay attention to that one. Give us some shouts on that, though, in the comments below. It'll be interesting to read what you've got to say, because I know some of you already, I can see you typing away already in the comments regarding Carlos Baleba, so I'll prepare myself for those later on. And sticking with the £70 million or euro range, Felix Nmecha, who's another player that we have been linked with recently, is being valued at around £70 million. So Manchester United plans for a significant midfield overhaul this summer have placed Borussia Dortmund's Felix Nmecha firmly on their radar. Dortmund would demand a fee in the region of €70 million to consider selling him, with Chelsea and United interested. There's Chelsea again. They're like our shadow, aren't they, when it comes to transfers? Can't get in. They've got to get involved, haven't they? In a transfer if we're looking for a player, but maybe a cheaper, more realistic option. Again, I think they're still drawing up lists of targets. And, if we get Champions League, maybe we've then got the money to go in and break our transfer record for Elliot Anderson. Maybe we don't, and we pivot towards and go for a cheaper option in Baleba and then Nmecha. Who knows? There's plenty of options for the midfield. It's just about availability, price, Champions League, competition. And we'll see who we end up with. But the reality is we're going to improve the midfield hopefully in the summer. It's just a case of who, when, what, how much. All dependent. We'll all have to wait and see who we kind of pivot for. Now, interestingly, some of our summer business, to continue going forward, we need exits, we need sales. Now, this came out from Jamie Jackson. Now, Jamie Jackson's a good reporter, so I don't want to dismiss this story, right? He's in the press conferences and stuff and is very well connected to United. However, he is a shit stirrer sometimes, right? And I think this is a rage bait piece, I think, from Jamie Jackson, saying that André Onana wants to fight to re-establish himself as Manchester United's number one goalkeeper when his loan at Trabzonspor finishes in May, and believes he will be given a chance to do so, because there's been other reports that contradict what Jamie Jackson is saying, and that's why I think he's maybe doing a little bit of pot stirring to put the cat amongst the pigeons when it comes to André Onana, following the back of, fancy bringing out this story after St. Lemons has just had like an absolute worldie game against Everton and is getting all the praise, and then their story drops to say Onana wants to come back and thinks that wants to compete for the number one spot. Coincidence? Methinks not, because Chris Wheeler said that Inter Milan are exploring a move for André Onana back from Manchester United this summer. The goalkeeper's representatives have already opened discussions over a return following a loan spell at Trabzonspor. United would consider a sale in the region of £30 million to help reduce the wage bill, but no agreement has been reached yet. And this is where I wanted to talk to you a little bit around the wages, because I can see arguments for the reduction in the wage bill, because a lot of the players that we've got and we have been trapped with have been some of the worst wages that we've paid out. And that's a massive problem at United. In order to fix that, I think we do have to cap the wages, because it should, when we were winning titles and trophies, some of our players weren't the best players, paid players in the Premier League, let alone the world. They were well paid, and towards the end of the time, when the commerciality got a little bit more in the Premier League and stuff, then yes, the bonuses went up and the wages went up for the top players. It had to be for us to remain competitive, but still we had players like Gary Neville's been speaking about it a lot in the overlap, that his wages were like $2 million a year, and then you had a lot of other players are coming in that were earning like ridiculous amounts more than Gary Neville, and that was towards the end when he was an established captain, all of that stuff. So I do think there needs to be a balance. I don't think we should be giving out silly contracts to new signings anymore, because we've seen the gamble and it's a risk with them coming in. If they've come in and they're playing well and they're earning their keep and they're contributing to the first team, then yes, I'm not against us giving out high wages for high performers. That's how it should be at United. But I don't think we should be giving a brand new signing 300 grand a week anymore when we don't know how they're gonna respond to putting the Man United shirt on, because it's one of those, we're one of those clubs where it's sink or swim, and if you do that, you run the risk of them being trapped with people potentially like Onana, who's on big wages. We've seen Jadon Sancho, Marcus Rashford. The list is endless, going all the way back to Alexis Sanchez, that we ended up having to pay out of his contract for him to leave the club because he was on ridiculous wages and offering no value. So that's my personal opinion on it, but some of you will be different. But let me know in the comments how you feel regarding that. Going back to Onana, though, Alex Crook also said that Manchester United have no intention of reintegrating André Onana to the squad and are planning to sell him. So while there's been a report from Jamie Jackson, which we can't dismiss, suggesting that maybe Onana wants to come back and fight for his place in the first team, two other reports suggesting otherwise. So we'll have to wait and see. Like I can't see United wanting to bring Onana back, because I don't think he's better than I don't think he's anywhere near St. Lemons. I imagine how many goals we would have conceded goals against Everton with Onana in net. That's a guarantee because of the corners and, even some of the shots that Saint Lemons was holding on to as well and not parrying back into the 6-yard box. I don't think Onana would have done as well with those. So yeah, I can't see it personally. Now, keeping with goalkeepers though, there's been a report coming out from Turkey saying that Besiktas have agreed a deal with Manchester United to sign Altay Bayindir this summer for €5 million. United are willing to sell with under 18 months left on his deal, plus an optional year. Personal terms are also settled at around $2 million a year, down from the initial $3 million discussions. So there's reports coming from Turkey suggesting that Bayindir and United have already agreed a deal for Besiktas to sign Altay Bayindir in the summer. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Bayindir stays number 2 goalkeeper. I don't think he should be getting near the first team for important games anymore, because he had his opportunity at the start of the season. And Saint Lemons is the man for me. And then we've got Radek Vitek potentially coming back next season, and I wouldn't be against those. Vitek being number 2 and Saint Lemons being the number 1 goalkeeper, or maybe bringing a more experienced goalkeeper to help Saint Lemons in training, and a little bit like we've got with Tom Heaton, because there's still question marks around Tom Heaton potentially retiring this summer. There's rumours he might be getting a new 1-year deal to keep him around as part of the leadership group and the backroom setup and stuff. So we'll have to wait and see. But overall, I'm not really bothered. We've got a fantastic number 1 goalkeeper for the next few years, in my opinion. So we're talking about second goalkeepers and third choice goalkeepers. It's not really that mega for the club, is it? Let's be completely truthful. So give us your shouts on that in the comments down below, as I'm sure you will. Give us your thoughts on all the other topics discussed in today's video, because that's you all up to date with the latest news and transfer updates. Don't forget to smash that like button, hype the video, subscribe if you're new. See you in the next one.